Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Cooperation Tulsa Organizer Education Program. We are continuing our reading of A Full Spectrum Resistance, right for where we left off last time. So we'll just get right into that. We believe we ended last time at the section called Effective Recruitment. So that's where we're going to start from today. I will get back over into the right chat here. All right. So to get started with, it's good to understand why people become radicals in general and how movements grow and develop. But recruitment is ultimately practical, not theoretical. And history offers us many different practical approaches to choose from. Powerful movements tend to use many methods at once. The Black Panther Party used broad-based approaches, including posters, pamphlets, and newspapers. But they also recruited by identifying the worst outrages against their community, police, brutality, hunger, poverty, and taking decisive action to address those problems. They instituted quote-unquote survival programs like soup kitchens, free breakfast programs for kids, and medical clinics. The Panthers would bail people out of jail or show up with their guns when a person was being arrested and loudly explain the arrestees' legal rights to everyone in earshot. A number of Panthers said that the police did more recruiting for the BPP than did the party itself. See, I remember reading this, but I don't remember how much further we got than this. Their use of direct action often won them a lot of support from the community. An example, in early 1967, the Panthers observed that there was a particularly dangerous intersection at which several young children had been killed. Panther members collected signatures and petitioned the city council for a traffic light. The BPP were informed that it would take more than a year to put a traffic light in place. Dissatisfied by this response, the Panthers went down to the intersections themselves, guns in hand, and started to direct traffic. When the Oakland police realized what was happening, they offered to take over traffic direction themselves. Traffic lights were installed the following week. Oversteegen recruitment. Nazi-occupied Netherlands, 1941. Late at night, teenage sisters Truus and Freddie Oversteegen, or 17 and 15 respectively, get ready to go out to the woods. There they will meet with a man they barely know, a resistance recruiter, in the hope that they can join the fight to kick out the Nazis. It's a course that Truus and Freddie have been on for a long time, as Ingrid Strobel relates in her book, Partisanos. They lived with their mother and their little brother, dependent on social assistance. They were so poor that they had only 3 blankets. But according to the government, families on social assistance were only entitled to 2 blankets, so they had to hide the 3rd blanket when government officials came to inspect their apartment. Their mother was a communist who would bring the 2 girls along on marches when they were very young. She taught Truus and Freddie about the nature of fascism and the importance of solidarity. Quote, "You must always help each other. Neither of you must abandon the other," end quote. When the Nazis came to power in Germany, a trickle of fleeing refugees began to move through the Netherlands. Soon the trickle became a flood of political dissidents, Jews, and other persecuted people. The Oversteegen family would shelter refugees and share what little they had themselves. Their mother pointed out to them that many of the refugees were Germans, and that it was not German people who were evil, but Nazism. Next.
Sorry. Hopefully people can hear me on the live. The Nazis invaded and occupied the Netherlands in 1940. Truus and Freddie, still girls, used their experience of clandestine organizing to distribute underground newspapers and put up graffiti. Not long after the occupation began, the Overstegens had a Jewish family living with them, a woman and 2 children, who had fled Germany and whose father had been captured by Nazis. One day, the father's personal effects arrive in the mail, along with his blood-soaked clothing. The effect on the Oversteegen sisters was profound. So when Truce and Freddie are approached by an underground organizer named Franz, they decide to join the armed resistance against fascism. Before agreeing to move forward, they demand that they will receive full resistance training, including how to shoot. Franz agrees and arranges to meet them in the woods outside the town of Haarlem, telling them that if they want to join the resistance, they will first have to prove themselves. Truce and Freddie, shivering from cold and nervousness, walk through the woods together to the rendezvous. Soon Franz arrives. When he asks if they are afraid, they respond with stoic silence. Franz speaks briefly about the work of the resistance. Then suddenly and rather strangely, Franz asks the address of someone they know. They know the man and don't much like him, but refuse to answer the question. Franz persists. Maybe, he alludes, they are too uncooperative to be part of the resistance. But Truce and Freddie stick to their security culture. Suddenly, Franz draws a gun and points it at them. They have walked into a trap, he informs them. He is, in fact, a Gestapo officer, and if they want to live, they must tell him the address immediately. In response, they attack him with everything they have. They knock him to the ground, punching and kicking and biting for their lives. Their attack is so vicious that they barely hear Franz yelling, "It is only a test, he is not a Nazi." Only once they have disarmed the bruised and bloody Franz, once they hold him on the ground at gunpoint, do they relent in their attack and let him speak. They pass the test. Here are some suggestions for effective recruiting. Know why you are recruiting people. What do you want them to do? Are you trying to form a new group out of separate individuals, mutual recruitment, or do you want to recruit people into an existing group, organizational recruitment? If you are trying to form a core group that will set tone and strategy, be careful to recruit people who can work well together and have enough common ground to move forward effectively. For a new group, Ed Hedeman suggests, quote, the key is to attract 5 to 10 reliable workers who are likely to stay past the first few meetings. This is your core group, which will be expected to know what is going on with the group at all levels, end quote. Tailor your recruitment approach by understanding who you need. Do you need a small number of people with strong commitment and specific skills? Or do you just need plenty of warm bodies to show up at a protest or event? Above ground groups benefit from reaching as many people as possible and from getting recruits to come to them. Underground groups choose candidates carefully and approach them directly. Ask for small actions, then escalate. Resistance can be scary. It doesn't always involve immediate rewards. But as social movements have shown, the easiest way to get someone involved is to ask them to do something simple and low risk, like signing a petition or wearing a button. Once people start to get involved, they see that things are not so scary, or that the cause is worth the risk, and they are gradually willing to take on roles with more responsibility or hardship. Starting small isn't just a way to make new people comfortable. It can also be a way for existing organizing to assess them. I asked Sarah Falconer about her work to integrate new people into the anarchist Black Cross, ABC, Prisoners Support Organization in Toronto. Quote, for us, it's been about using soft levels to get people involved. We have our letter writing nights in town where if people just want to write and do a bit of work with us, they don't need to join our collective to do a lot of the work we need done. They don't have to take on decision making or responsibility to complete certain tasks, end quote. Sarah herself got started by distributing the Certain Days Political Prisoner calendar. Eventually, Sarah says, it becomes clear who should be invited to become a core decision maker. Quote, we get to know the people who are committed and who fit with us. We spend a lot of time with a person on non-committal day-to-day stuff. We find that the people who come to us and ask to join the collective are the same people we would have asked to join. You get a sense of if it's a good fit, end quote. Next.
Use engagement circles. You can think of any resistance movement as a group or a set of concentric circles. Those at the center are the most involved: cadres and combatants, the organizers and frontline activists. Around that is a circle of auxiliaries, supporters, and part time helpers. And outside of that is the largest group of mostly passive supporters and sympathizers, or the mass base. And next we have a table that goes through the engagement circles. It has the cadres, leaders, combatants at the core, auxiliaries next, mass base of movement, and then general population as the largest circle. As a movement recruiter, your job is to constantly be drawing people inward. People on the outside become aware through outreach and join the mass base of sympathizers. Through consciousness raising and organizing, people from the mass base start to help out sometimes and become auxiliaries. Through action and training, suitable people from the auxiliaries become cadres or combatants. Oh, okay. Another table. Figure 4.3, engagement circle recruitment. Starting outside at the general population, ask for small actions, then escalate. Make personal contact via guest talks, social events, or canvassing. Have a big event, do something dramatic. Keep track of contacts, reach out online. And then drawing inward, we have the mass base. Hold trainings to raise awareness and counter fear. Make materials succinct, punchy, and easy to pass on. Have members bring a friend. Maximize biographical availability and approach those already affected. Drawing inward to auxiliaries is asking people directly, screen volunteers. Don't be afraid to say no, build strong ties. And then at the core with cadres, leaders, and combatants, train and retain. The methods needed at each stage are slightly different, see figure 4.3, but the overall principles are similar. Early on, people can progress through mass outreach and media messages. The further along they get, the more important training and personal relationships with existing organizers become. Of course, some people won't want to escalate their commitment, and that's okay. Ed Hedeman suggests different people participate at different levels. Some people hate meetings but love to leaflet or attend demonstrations. Others have no free time but wish to contribute money. A healthy group will encourage participation at whatever level people can offer. Make personal contact via guest talks, social events, or canvassing. Most people find personal relationships and communities more rewarding than abstract ideology. Personal relationships, strong ties that bind groups together. As A.G. Schwartz argues, we have emotional ties. I won't minimize the importance of theory, but I will put it in its place. Most people do not risk their lives in the struggle on a basis of theory, but on the basis of empathy, love, courage, and rage. End quote. Even getting people to sign petitions can be part of this. The strength of a petition has never been an ability to persuade those in power. Petitions have been useful historically because they are a small first step and because they allow organizers to make personal social contact with sympathizers, which online petitions fail to do. Have a big event, do something dramatic. I've been critical of actions that make a splash without having much material effect, but splashy actions have their place in outreach and recruitment. Eric Hirsch argues that people will want to join movements if they are growing and look like they can win. It's called the bandwagon effect. Hirsch writes, quote, "Tactics are more easily viewed as powerful if they are highly visible, dramatic, and disrupt normal institutional routines." End quote. The bandwagon effect is something we see online, on social media. Subjects that have rapidly growing attention may be marked trending. The bandwagon effect is similar and happens when people feel that a cause or movement has real momentum, when it seems like everyone is talking about the issue and wanting to get involved. Next.
Keep track of contacts. At every event, at every public opportunity, always give people an opportunity to sign up with their contact information. Make sure you know how to reach new participants and invite them to future events. It helps when someone is responsible for consolidating a list of supporters and possible members. Keeping track will also help you to know if you are reaching new people and if your recruitment strategy is actually working. Reach out online. Online is easy to follow where your messages go and whether they are being passed on. This is quick. Quick, easy, and empirical way to see whether specific attempts at outreach are actually working. Hold training to raise awareness and counter fear. People are scared of repression, and understandably so, but too often they repress these feelings or come up with self-serving excuses like resistance never works, so what we shouldn't try. It's better to get these feelings out in the open and normalize them. It's okay to feel afraid, but we must learn to act even when we are afraid by understanding our struggle and getting the support of a group. Movie nights can be a good way to counter fear while simultaneously building community. For example, watch a movie with a historical movement that was repressed, and especially that one. People can discuss how they feel and put their own worries into perspective. That said, in repressive circumstances, there are real dangers that movements must be aware of, particularly in recruiting. I'll come back to this and to the paradox of militant radicalization in Chapter 6. Make materials. I don't know. Succinct, punchy, and easy to pass on. Resistance is a lot of work, and resistant movements have limited time and resources. Get your supporters and potential recruits to do some of the work for you by passing on engaging messages. I'll come back to what this means in Chapter 7, communications. Have members bring a friend. Word of mouth is very effective for resistance movements. People are more likely to take on risky or difficult organizing if they already have a relationship with someone who is doing it. Friends or relatives of activists are often familiar with the work, so participation isn't as strange or intimidating, and asking everyone to bring one friend to the next event is a quick and easy way to double your numbers. Maximize biographical availability. Simple, but important. If you want to involve people who would otherwise be unavailable, consider adaptations like adjusting meeting times, providing childcare, offering food, having meetings in accessible locations, and so on. Approach those already affected. Resistance movements deal with issues that many people are afraid to confront, so find the people who have shown they aren't afraid. You can also do that by recruiting from people already working on your cause and those directly affected by your issues. The Black Panthers did this well. Sarah Falconer told me that the mass arrests and repressions at the Toronto G20 in 2010 dramatically increased support for prisoner organizations because people had family or friends who were arrested. Ask people directly, especially if they have the skills you need. Ed Peterman writes, the most effective method to convincing people to attend a meeting is one-on-one contact. If people are asked directly to come to a meeting, then they are more likely to attend than if they simply hear or read about it without being put on the spot for commitment. Volunteering experts Steve McCurley and Sue Vineyard suggest do not ask for a volunteer. Those who volunteer are not necessarily the right person for the job. Make a request of a specific person to do a specific job. Do not be afraid to ask someone to do the work. It is actually a compliment to the person since it recognizes their abilities and their commitment. The worst that can happen is a refusal. Paradoxically, the best people to ask are often the people who are already the busiest. If you don't already know people who have the right skills, you could choose some people to be talent scouts or to do a survey of supporters. In more than one campaign, I've used surveys of supporters handed out in person to see how people wanted to contribute, what skills they could offer, and whether they were willing to get arrested doing civil disobedience. Surveys are also a quick way to gauge support and capacity for different courses of action in a campaign. As an organizer, I'm a huge believer in asking people directly to join a group or get active. A personal conversation lets us make an emotional connection with potential members, and if they are hesitant to join, we get immediate and direct feedback on why they might hesitate, and areas where our message is falling short. And if you can understand what their personal obstacles to action are, you can address them by having a conversation and addressing misconceptions. Being an effective recruiter means making it as easy as possible for people to join your movement, to identify and remove as many obstacles and hesitations as you can. Screen volunteers. Screening is essential, especially important for groups working in more dangerous situations or using more serious tactics. Consider the Deacon for Defense, as Lance Hill writes. It was natural that the deacons would attract the more combative men, warriors hardened by the military, the streets, or prisons. Their chief prerequisite was reckless courage, a quality found more frequent in the hustler and street thug than in the preacher. But they didn't take just anyone. As Hill explains, members had to be a good moral character, in contrast to the Black Panthers who recruited from the unemployed and the margins of society. The deacons screened prospective members to exclude people with criminal tendencies and quick tempers. Individuals of poor reputation and troublemakers were unacceptable. Depending on the work you do, you might want to screen for specific problems, including instability or a history of abusive or destructive behavior. For underground groups in particular, everything depends on proper screening. I wrote a list of screening methods for the book Deep Green Resistance, which is included here as an appendix. Next.
Oh, it's me. Okay. Don't be afraid to say no, but do it nicely. Sorry, give me a sec. Stop that. Listen to Charles Dobson, author of The Troublemakers Tea Party, a manual for effective citizen action. Quote, the makeup of the core will determine the friendliness, effectiveness, and longevity of the group. So don't open the door to just anyone, and don't extend an open invitation to anyone who wants to join. Instead, carefully choose friendly, keen people with a record of getting things done. If you must open the door to general membership, do so after you have an effective core group in place, end quote. Though in an ideal world, all groups would be totally open, quote, in practice, small groups with no external support tend to break up when they include people who are incompetent, unreliable, or simply unpleasant, end quote. If you do have to turn someone down, try to do it in as positive a way as possible. You likely want them to continue to be a supporter and to contribute in other ways in the future. Build strong ties. On the fringes of a resistance movement, people are held together by what sociologists call weak ties, casual relationships that can be created at a distance or over the internet. Weak ties, as with acquaintances, are easy to form, but to take on more serious action and keep groups together through hardship, resistors need, quote, strong ties, deeper, enduring relationships that are built face to face. Strong ties are built on trust, mutual affinity, and a shared history of action. They are also developed through social time and mutual care. Strong ties are essential to the success of any resistance movement. Make a recruitment plan and revisit it regularly. Your plan doesn't have to be complicated. It can be a one-page list, but to get better at recruiting, you must at least occasionally set aside time to think about what you're doing and whether it's working. How many people do you want in your core group? How many people do you need to come out to actions to get things done? Are you getting enough new people? Do they have the skills that you need? Are your recruits sufficiently diverse and representative of the people you're fighting for and alongside? And so on. Ed Hedeman suggests, quote, "The key is to be creative and continue to reach out. No group, no matter how stable at one time, will remain that way for long without continually trying to gain new members." End quote. How much have I read already? Okay. So now a gray box. Volunteer recruitment tips. An effective recruiter needs to be a persuasive communicator with good interviewing skills. Thorough knowledge of the organization, its goals, strategies, and expectations for the recruit, and an intuitive knack for negotiation and building rapport. They also need to believe in what they're doing. The quote, "The world's best recruiters are satisfied volunteers," explained McCurley and Vineyard. Oh, my cat just laid on the keyboard. Can't do that, baby. Can't do that. They also need to believe in what they're doing. Quote, "The world's best recruiters are satisfied volunteers," end quote, explained McCurley and Vineyard. They offer some practical tips for dealing with hesitation or objections on the part of potential recruits. McCurley and Vineyard suggest that recruiters have to classify an objection to overcome it. If the candidate wants to stall, stress the need for an immediate response to a current and urgent situation. If the candidate expresses doubt, provide proof. If the candidate requests assurance, provide a guarantee if possible. That is, a guarantee for what the recruiting organization will do, not a guarantee for events outside that organization's control. If the candidate requests pressure, coax me, McCurley and Vineyard write, push gently, but don't arm twist. If the candidate seems to have a hidden objection or hesitancy, probe gently and use open-ended questions to identify the objection. If the candidate has a false data objection based on a misconception or incorrect information, offer correct information. If the candidate has a real objection based on true information, minimize if possible, but don't lie or deny. They offer 3 general rules for dealing with objections. Quote, "Do not put anyone down for a real objection they have. Do not be judgmental. Never be dishonest," end quote. Remember that in recruitment, you're setting an example and setting the tone for that person's future actions inside your organization. And then that's the end of the gray box. In my experience as a farm and union organizer, it's this planning component that is the most difficult for grassroots groups. It's easy when a crisis excites people, but in the long haul, recruitment is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. Next.
The Freedom Summer. We can learn a lot about recruitment from the 1964 Freedom Summer. Freedom Summer was a civil rights mobilization campaign and voter drive focused on Mississippi. It relied heavily on white students from the North. The plan to use white students was controversial among Southern Black organizers, some of whom worried that the, quote, tendency of white students to appropriate leadership roles would hamper the development of indigenous Black leadership while also reinforcing traditional patterns of racial dominance and submission within the movement, end quote. They decided to proceed anyway, in part hoping that getting volunteers from elite colleges and universities would help them to recruit a counter power elite. From the start, it was made clear to everyone that Freedom Summer was a dangerous project for all involved. Indeed, their fears of right-wing violence would prove correct. Over 10 weeks, 3 civil rights workers were murdered, and at least 3 more Black Mississippians killed. There would also be numerous beatings, nearly 70 bombings, and more than 1,000 arrests. So what allowed civil rights organizers to recruit people for such a dangerous project, and what determined whether volunteers would actually show up? The recruitment process had several stages. First, organizers went on a speaking tour to explain the campaign and invite people to volunteer. Potential volunteers had to write a letter explaining their desire to join the campaign. The most promising applicants were interviewed, and week-long trainings were given to successful candidates. Years later, Doug McAdam reviewed interviews and statements from the project volunteers, and what he learned is illuminating. Writes McAdam, quote, Their narrative statements predate the emergence of the mass New Left and the dissemination of its political perspective throughout mainstream youth culture. So, unlike activists in the late 60s, for whom the correct political analysis became de rigueur, the Freedom Summer applicants display a remarkably eclectic mix of worldviews and reasons for wanting to go to Mississippi. End quote. Some applicants made no mention of politics at all. The non-political people were mostly teachers or religiously motivated. McAdam notes that, quote, regardless of ideological stripe, the vast majority of applicants credit their parents with being the models for their actions. Far from using Freedom Summer as a vehicle for rebellion against parents, the applicants simply seem to be acting in accord with values learned at home, end quote. But the volunteers for Freedom Summer were not completely new to political work, most having a history of some kind of entry-level activism. As McAdam observes, quote, extremely risky, time-consuming involvements such as Freedom Summer are almost always preceded by a series of safer, less demanding instances of activism. In effect, people commit themselves to movements in stages, each activity preparing the way for the next, end quote. Quote, confronted by various hurdles, roughly a quarter of the applicants fell by the wayside prior to the start of the project, notes McAdam. He asks, can these no-shows be distinguished from those who did make it to Mississippi? Put simply, yes. Their attendance, quote, had more to do with the applicant's biographical availability and social links to the project than to any apparent differences in attitude, end quote. The three major factors that prevented people from coming were rejection by the organizers, parental opposition, and applicant fears. Importantly, most of those who showed up already knew some of the other people involved. Quote, stated simply, the volunteers enjoyed much stronger social links to the summer project than did the no-shows. They were more likely to be members of civil rights or allied groups, have friends involved in the movement, and have more extensive histories of civil rights activity prior to the summer. End quote. Having applied, McAdam argues, the volunteers' close ties to the civil rights community would then have served another function. Given the extended time commitment expected of Freedom Summer volunteers and the highly publicized dangers of the campaign, it seems reasonable to assume that individual applicants, even highly committed ones, would have considered withdrawing from the campaign prior to the summer. What might have discouraged applicants from acting on these fears was the presence of strong social constraints discouraging withdrawal, end quote. That is, they would have been embarrassed to leave or encouraged and supported by their friends to follow through on their commitment, and some combination of the two. There are plenty of lessons to take from this, but for me, the most important is this. If you want to recruit people for your movement, the single thing you must do is to build strong ties and strong communities. Ideological orthodoxy is less important, even for radical groups. What really matters is whether you can build relationships that will bring new people in and make them want to become a part of your movement. Next.
The PAIGC and Amilcar Cabral. Everyone has heard of Che Guevara, but far too few know the name of Amilcar Cabral. A brilliant thinker and passionate revolutionary, Cabral was a more effective strategist and organizer than Guevara and many of his better-known contemporaries. As founder of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, the PAIGC, Cabral's work led to the emancipation of the Portuguese colonies of Cape Verde and Guinea. As historian Patrick Chabal writes, the PAIGC was the most successful nationalist movement in Black Africa and the first to achieve independence through armed struggle. Chabal adds, quote, the PAIGC's achievements were very largely due to Cabral's leadership. The central aspect of Cabral's leadership was his unparalleled ability to combine pragmatic political effectiveness with a high degree of adherence to human decency as principle of political action. In 1960, the population of Guinea-Bissau was less than 600,000 people. In such a small population, one person can have an enormous effect. But Cabral's effectiveness did not come from a centralized authoritarian vanguard. Quite the opposite. As Patrick Chabal explains, quote, probably the most impressive feature of Cabral's leadership was his success in developing a party which could operate effectively without him. Cabral's approach consisted in relying more on the cadre, core organizers, which he trained than on the structure or ideology of the party, end quote. By the time Cabral was born in 1924, the long history of Portuguese colonialism had left deep scars on the people of Guinea and Cape Verde. The people's scars, left by its centuries of slavery and exploitation, mirrored the scars of the land. Cape Verde, despite its name, is not a green or lush place. Quite the opposite. A set of volcanic islands off the Atlantic coast of Africa, Cape Verde was historically uninhabited and prone to drought. But the Portuguese used it as a way station for the slave trade starting in the late 1400s. By the 1900s, agriculture had eroded its fragile soil and the country was importing 95% of its food. The situation in mainland Guinea was better, but not by much. The agricultural practices imposed by the Portuguese occupiers were intensive and export-based at the expense of crop diversity and traditional food practices. A serious crisis was brewing. In 1926, Portugal, after a brief period as a post-monarchy republic, was turned into a fascist state under Antonio de Oliveira Salazar. When global economic crisis and world war began in the 1930s, the effects in Cape Verde and Guinea were severe. Between 1940 and 1948, more than a quarter of the population of Cape Verde, at least 50,000 people, starved to death. The Portuguese government knew that they had overpopulated the island through slavery, and that the agricultural methods of wealthy landholders were destroying the soil, but they did nothing. Cabral, a young man living on the islands during the famine, would later explain, quote, I saw people die of starvation in Cape Verde. This is the fundamental reason for my revolt. This experience had a profound impact on his psyche and also on his vocation. At the end of World War II, he traveled to Lisbon to train as an agronomist. He wrote a series of articles about fighting soil erosion called Em Defesa da Terra, in defense of the land, as well as other papers and arguments for land reform. In his final thesis, he argued against pure science, writing that solely technological solutions to soil erosion did not exist because erosion was caused in part by social and economic inequality. He argued that trying to solve food crises through mechanization was overly simplistic, and that export-driven agriculture policies put in place by the colonizers were destroying the land of Africa. His work increasingly involved a fusion of revolutionary and land-based ideas. When he returned home from Portugal in 1954, Cabral decided to start a sports and social club for young people. His intent was to bring young people together and develop their confidence and national pride, similar to the way the Gaelic Athletic Association in Ireland helped lay the groundwork for Irish resistance. But colonial authorities viewed this work with suspicion. Cabral was surveyed by secret police, and his club was suppressed. So in 1956, along with his brother Luis, Amilcar Cabral founded the PAIGC resistance movement. Early recruitment was difficult. At first, they focused their strategy on the urban proletariat and organized through a legitimate trade union. But by 1960, their movement still consisted of a handful of members and a few dozen young recruits. It had no financial resources, no weapons, and few international contacts. They reevaluated their strategy and approach and decided to focus their organizing efforts outside the city. The majority of the population and the latent social and economic force was in the countryside. But urban labor organizing techniques like mass rallies did not work in the countryside. The population was diffuse, and villages had traditional and decentralized power structures. If the PAIGC was to win, they would have to reach out and mobilize thousands of separate communities directly. So they came up with a plan based on the recruitment and training of cadres who would live in specific villages and engage their people. Cabral's character was a major reason for the PAIGC's success. He was extremely intelligent, but he was no reclusive intellectual. He was patient and at ease with others, wanting to understand the perspectives of the people around him, even when dealing with racists. By training and personality, Cabral was pragmatic, fact-driven, and empirical. Amilcar's brother Luis explained, he was a scientist. He spoke of the struggle the same way he would speak of agriculture. Next.
It was Jen, but they're not in the meeting anymore. Oh, Jen. It's your turn to read, Jen. Are you good?
Yes, I click back and it takes you out. Effective recruiting. Why was Cabral so effective at recruiting, radicalizing, and training the PAIGC's cadres? Dedication, for one. Early in the struggle, he spent 2 years and almost every waking moment engaged in basic training of recruits. He knew that he needed to build a solid base of cadres for armed struggle consisting of women and men. He was also successful because of his intelligence and gentle approach. As his wife, Maria Helena Rodriguez, explained, he was very gifted. He started teaching these young people, and he absolutely transformed them. He knew how to listen to them and explain things to them in a kind, thoughtful, and unaggressive way. He talked to them and convinced them. One recruit, Aristades Pereira, explained Cabral's efficiency stemmed from his ability to listen. After listening to our opinions, he was able to make a synthesis and draw simple conclusions. This may appear banal, but I think it was one of the greatest strengths of his personality. Another recruit was Francisco Mendez, who would later join the leadership of the PAIGC and become the first prime minister of an independent Guinea. Mendez explained, this was Cabral's greatest achievement. He understood that a struggle can only triumph when the militants clearly know what they want and the reasons for their involvement. Following that principle, he inquired about the social origins of all the young people integrated into the group and tried to turn each individual into a mobilizing force against Portuguese colonialism. Colonialism. Thank you. Cabral approach contrasts with many of the radicals I've met. Too commonly, radicals are hostile or willing to engage with those outside their intellectual corner. Aggressive righteousness has its place, but it is rarely helpful in getting allies or recruiting supporters. For Cabral, the practical concerns of organizing training and food were much more important than abstract orthodoxy. Cabral refused to be pinned down to a particular ideology that might alienate potential supporters. When asked in England if he was a Marxist, he responded, I am a freedom fighter in my country. You must judge from what I do in practice. If you decide it is Marxism, tell everyone it is Marxism. But the labels are your affair. We do not like those kinds of labels. In his essay, Tell No Lies, Claim No Easy Victories, Cabral underscored this point. Always, quote, always bear in mind that the people are not fighting for ideas, for the things in anyone's heads. They are fighting to win material benefits, to live better and in peace, to see their lives go forward, to guarantee the future of their children. His methods of training and mobilization reflected these beliefs. He would ask recruits questions. Why are we fighting? Whom are we fighting against? What is the meaning of our struggle? Are we fighting for a revolution of Guinea? What is political mobilization? Historian Patrick Chabal noted, quote, the answers to these questions were fairly abstract, end quote. Cabral wanted cadres to be able to integrate into their villages and make intelligent arguments for struggle. Cabral would hold role-playing games in which trainees would attempt to explain their political argument to a village chief. The other trainees would watch, and if they made a mistake, they would have to start again, repeating and repeating until their arguments were both effective and natural. The cadres avoided abstract political jargon and focused on clear, understandable materials that were relevant to militants and villagers alike. This flexibility and practicality meant that there was no rigid political orthodoxy in the party, and so the group was less prone to internal conflict and division. As Patrick Chabal explains, Cabral's approach was concrete, pragmatic, and emphasized the difficulties of mobilizing villagers who had understandable distrust of outsiders and foreign ideas. He sought to temper the political enthusiasm of these young recruits by making it clear to them that successful mobilization would require cooperation with rather than ousting the village chiefs. Later in the struggle, democratic village councils would be created, sometimes to the displeasure of traditional chiefs. Cabral himself explained, "We never mobilized our people on the basis of struggle against colonialism. It does not work. To speak of the struggle against imperialism simply does not work here. Instead, we use a simple language. We had to avoid giving the peasants the impression that we were strangers who had come to teach them lessons. We placed ourselves in the situation of someone who has come to learn, and slowly the villagers discovered by themselves that there is exploitation." Cabral initially sent recruits back to their home territory where they were most familiar with the indigenous language and customs, but some recruits had difficulty resisting the social pressures of their groups or families. So thereafter, to places where they hadn't grown up.
Hey, Jen, you're having a lot of lag, like you're kind of roboting.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did not know.
It's all good.
Up next.
What's that?
Is it all right if we go next then?
Sure, yeah. Okay. Escalation, victory, and murder. In the beginning, the struggle for liberation was mostly nonviolent, similar to the early African National Congress, see Chapter 6. From 1960 to 1962, the PAIGC worked to mobilize villagers, but the state repressed distant villages through mass killings. By 1962, huge numbers of Portuguese military reinforcements had arrived in the country, and the revolutionaries lacked arms to defend themselves. The PAIGC was not yet a guerrilla force, but they needed to gain credibility and recruits in the villages, so they began small-scale armed attacks and sabotage. By 1963, they were liberating the areas of the country where their initial political mobilization had been most effective. To gain and hold territory is one of the most difficult and dangerous objectives of a resistance movement. It requires the use of more conventional military tactics than resistance forces are generally equipped and trained for. But PAIGC did gain territory at a great cost of life. Slowly but steadily, the PAIGC gained territory, experience, and support. By 1972, Cabral was working to organize a people's assembly as part of the transition to a fully independent and democratic nation. But the fascist Portuguese government, losing the war in every way that counted, was not about to give up the colonies without extracting more blood. Portuguese intelligence agents enlisted a disgruntled former guerrilla commander named Inocencio Cani. Cani had been a part of the PAIGC and a member of the Executive Council, but had been expelled for gross personal misconduct and abuse of power. On January 20th, 1973, Cani surprised Cabral outside his home and tried to take him prisoner to bring to the Portuguese. When Cabral refused to cooperate, Cani shot him in the abdomen. Wounded and on the ground, Cabral tried to convince Connie to talk, to give up the plot. Connie responded by opening fire again, shooting Cabral this time in the head, killing him. And so Cabral did not live to see his struggle's ultimate victory. Guinea declared independence only 8 months later. Cape Verde negotiated independence a year and a half later. In Portugal itself, fascism finally ended in 1974 after a leftist coup abolished the authoritarian state that had existed since before World War II. Quote, without the colonial wars, Cabral argues, there may not have been an early end to fascism in Portugal itself. The next section is called Train and Retain. Movements grow and thrive when they are able to train and retain members. Why is training important? According to the Resource Manual for a Living Revolution, training is needed to enable people and groups to develop an analysis, vision, and strategy tailored to the exact circumstances in which they find themselves, to understand how groups function, how decisions are made, and how they can work in more effective and satisfying ways, to face and resolve conflicts and problems arising as they live and work together, to develop more egalitarian, decentralized, and cooperative learning structures, and to use them in developing support communities, long-range campaigns, and new economic alternatives. In their book, A Manual for Direct Action, Martin Oppenheimer and George Lakey give 5 related reasons to hold direct action workshops: to practice skills, to understand your opponent, to build up morale, to get rid of tensions, and to make for more democracy. Next.
Religions and rebels. Both religious sects and resistance movements, Bert Klenderman's notes, must pay close attention to the factors that increase a person's commitment to a group or cause them to leave it. Many religious groups put a lot of effort into recruitment and retention. While there are obvious differences, both religious and resistance groups are motivated by deep beliefs, strong social ties, and faith that their dedication will eventually be rewarded, either by God or by social change. What can resistors learn from successful church recruiters? Church recruiter advice can seem eerily relevant if Christian is replaced with activists. Quote, non-activists may have negative images of activists, boring, killjoys, judgmental, etc. End quote, warns one outreach expert. Other writers warn against using language or jargon that preaches to the choir or seems patronizing. They also emphasize the importance of welcoming new and prospective members. Following up with newcomers shortly after their first visit significantly increases the chance of retention. The same degree of respect and appreciation should be shown for people already within or aligned with the community. Basic gestures of common courtesy, like thank you cards, help to build an inviting culture that maximizes retention. Some also suggest doing outreach to lapsed Christians by inviting them back into the church and trying to identify and address what caused them to leave in the first place. Such people are already familiar with the culture and beliefs of the church. There are many lapsed activists as well, or people who have moved away from the active organizing they've done in the past. Some of them could be brought back into the fold if a healthy community of resistance and plausible, exciting programs for success were offered. Extensive surveys of churches, mosques, temples, synagogues, and other religious institutions have identified key factors in successful recruitment. A strong negative factor is internal conflict. Major conflict within a congregation is very likely to lead to a decline in attendance. In general, a group's particular theological bent doesn't seem to affect growth as much as being purpose-driven. Congregations driven by a sense of purpose are much more likely to grow. Those aren't congregations that aim primarily on growth, but congregations that, quote, understand their reasons for being, end quote, and focus on their essential activities as a community. Not surprisingly, a willingness to experiment and try new ways of doing things also correlates with growth. Unwillingness and general stagnation correlate with decline. Organizations which make changes are much more likely to grow. Among congregations wishing to grow, the reported strength of desire for new members had no bearing on actual growth. On the other hand, congregations which actually came up with a plan to recruit new members, regardless of the specifics of that plan, were significantly more likely to grow. The more people in the congregation participate in recruitment, the more successful they are. Congregations with a website are much more likely to grow. Congregations that hold special events, support groups, and mutual aid groups are all more likely to grow. And the number of follow-up methods used with visitors directly correlated with the growth of a congregation. All of these lessons are applicable to activist recruitment as well.
All right. So that seems like a good place for us to end the reading for this evening. As usual, I'd just like to open the floor to everybody. Did anybody have any specific passage or part of the reading this evening that stood out to you?
I really, really liked the last bit where it kind of tied recruitment efforts into how church congregations and religious communities are able to do that outreach. The fact that it's centered around a sense of purpose um, is is really important, and it also kind of like when we think about the people that are out in society like doing the good works, it's really common for folks that aren't perhaps as left leaning as ourselves to think that it should be the function of the church to like step up and like take care of these social services and all of that. So I thought that that was a really interesting parallel, in that those are kind of important lessons to learn from that framework.
What about anybody else? Anybody else got any thoughts or anything that stood out to you about the reading? I'll say for my own part, I really enjoyed the section about Amilcar Cabral, and I thought it was really interesting them describing the qualities of his personality that made him good at what he did. I'm trying to find the specific one. Let's see. There we go. Cabral's efficiency stemmed from his ability to listen. After listening to our opinions, he was able to make a synthesis and draw simple conclusions. This may appear banal, but I think it was one of the great strengths of his personality. I find this to be a really interesting description. Another person said, this was Cabral's greatest achievement. He understood that a struggle can only triumph when the militants clearly know what they want and the reasons for their involvement. Following that principle, he inquired about the social origins of all the young people integrated into the group and tried to turn each individual into a mobilizing force against Portuguese colonialism. I think there's a lot to take, especially from this first quote, like stemmed from his ability to listen, but also after he listened to people's opinions, he was able to make a synthesis and draw simple conclusions. This is something I really advocate people do a lot, which is like meeting people where they're at. First, you have to understand what their perspective is. Then you try to meet them at that place. You don't have them meet you where you're at in your journey of radicalization. You meet them where they're at in their journey of questioning and radicalization.
was pretty cool to read that like one of his disciples kind of became the leader of of other things, and yeah, that he kind of just got them to critically think and just actually push forward with their ideas to the end.
Springing off of the part that you brought up, Daniel, one of the things that stood out to me was whenever they were talking about bringing their cadres into, the different like villages and all of that, was specifically not approaching it from a place of like, we're here to teach you a thing. It's, approaching it from the perspective of, we're here to learn from you, and then we can see how we can all like grow and build together. That was huge.
Yeah, I think that's something that is like he even says like right after here, and this is pretty much my thought. Cabral's approach contrasts with many of the radicals I have met. Too commonly, radicals are hostile or unwilling to engage with those outside their tiny intellectual corner. Aggressive righteousness has its place, but it is rarely helpful in getting allies or recruiting supporters. I just think that
Oh, the tiny intellectual corner.
it's real. Yeah, I think that's a big problem. So many radicals are really just so aggressive with people who don't already agree with them, or even people who are like, skeptical, or that just have like, some critical questions, or they just don't understand, right? And I find that, so many radicals like take this stance, like the person is like I don't know, like the person has offended them that they disagreed, like they just get very aggressive, like they have to fight that person intellectually or something. It's very unhealthy. And I think that people have to learn how to kind of like self-moderate, be patient, like listen to what they're saying, don't get angry. Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of good insight in this section. I think, he was right to include Amilcar Cabral here because he has a lot of good personal qualities I think that people should be trying to emulate.
Absolutely. I really like this part that you have up on the screen right now, where he says, I am a freedom fighter in my country. You must judge from what I do in practice. If you decide it is Marxism, tell everyone it is Marxism, but the labels are your affair. We don't like those kinds of labels. I think that the way that, and this stems from like online leftist culture too, is the way that leftists like to label themselves and put each other into boxes, and like it really like that's not the point, but it creates like so much more space for that, like that infighting, and the I'm so stuck on the tiny intellectual corner thing, like like that's just a sick burn.
Yeah, it's very real, very real. Yeah, no, actually, I think that one of the big strengths of Cooperation Tulsa has been that our organization is not signaling with like traditional leftist aesthetics. Like the word socialism is nowhere in our name or in our materials, or nor is communism, nor is anarchism. Instead, we kind of just like more broadly discuss what our principles are. We just describe our principles in the what we think is the appropriate language. And I think that's been enormously successful. That's allowed us to walk in many different worlds and to not just kind of like immediately make enemies of people. I think that's an important part of why I think that Cooperation Tulsa has kind of been a success.
Would you say, Daniel, having read through this section and like seeing the way that these recruitment techniques and strategies were kind of outlined, like do you see like the work that y'all do with Cooperation Tulsa, like are you kind of like seeing that stuff like described in what's happening here, or is there stuff here that you think you'll be able to like fold in more actively moving forward?
Yeah, both, right? So like a mixture, like in some places. So like while I'm reading through this, or while I'm hearing people read it, there's stuff where I'm like, yeah, we definitely need to be doing that. Like, oh yeah, we need to focus on that a lot more. And then there are other parts where I'm like, yeah, we're doing that. That part we're good at. And it's a little bit inconsistent. And so far, not his work's fine. But our application is somewhat inconsistent. We definitely have room to grow, but a lot of it's capacity. When I'm reading through here, there's so many parts where he'll be saying it and I'm like, wow, yeah, that's very true. We definitely need to do that. And then I think about what it would take to carry it out. And I'm like, wow, well, I don't know if we have the energy to carry that out. It would be very difficult. But I agree with basically what he's saying here. So, I think that one thing we've done really good at is we're always integrating with our community and meeting new people in our community and making ourselves very present in a bunch of organizations, and that has always helped us with recruitment. Another method we use for recruitment is social media. So we definitely try to recruit by trying to get our reels into the Instagram feed and everything. And Instagram just so happens to kind of get to a lot of people here in town. And that works really well. But one thing I remember reading where I was like, oh, we need to do better at that, is that, there needs to be a place where everybody who has any, a variety of different interests can plug in. We've been trying to do that by having a diversity of different programs, but I still think that, we kind of lack a certain number of ways that somebody could plug in, which would be super helpful to the organization and would allow those people to help. So one of them is flyering or leafleting or whatever. That could totally be super helpful to the organization, but we do basically none. We do not leaflet, we do not flyer. But that would be super useful. And certain people, if they were to join the org, might really be, that might be where they wanted to plug in. So I hope that was an answer to your question.
Absolutely. That was something I was thinking about. I don't remember which passage it was that brought it up, but like uh I don't know, the in the political climate that we find ourselves in, I think it's easy to be kind of reactive in terms of that messaging. A person could, carry around stickers or spray paint to make sure that, they see some bullshit messaging out in the world. Okay, well, we have the ability to cover it, but the proactive flyering and all of that. I don't know. I don't see wheat pasting things out in the world anymore. But yeah, the proactive distribution of message. But you said that the online recruitment has and sharing just what you're doing online has been really effective for the organization.
100%. Yeah. No, so many people who know about the organization discovered us on Instagram or whatever. I would say specifically Instagram, not really Twitter. Twitter mostly gets to people who are national or international, and Facebook, I mean, it just doesn't seem to get around much. Mostly it's just things get stuck in people's little insular networks on Facebook. But Instagram, for whatever reason, seems to cross over a lot of in the town. A lot of different people seem to encounter things that way. And that's been super helpful for teaching people about what we're doing and us making videos to keep people up to date with what we're doing. That's been super helpful. But there's also just a lot of it is word of mouth. People just hear about it because some person, they say, oh, I think we should we got to just start building our own power structures. We need our own alternatives. And some person's like, oh, well, there's a group in town called Cooperation Tulsa. They do that. That's their exact thing. Right. And they're like, oh, cool. Give me some information, But no, social media has been a big part of it, 100%. And even to the degree my YouTube channel, Anark has been a huge way of bringing people in. I've been surprised to find, like, I think it's like 3 separate members who are like pretty steady members in the organization, saw Anark before they ever knew about Cooperation Tulsa. And then I just mentioned that I'm in Tulsa and I'm with an organization called Cooperation Tulsa. And then they went and applied for Cooperation Tulsa. So I don't know, like I think that just getting the word out there is like a big part of it for sure.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in, but the 2 parts that I liked the most from the reading was the part we just talked about where he was talking about no labels. And then also the other part where it was kind of talking about, people who, may be interested in flyering or things like that and might not be so interested in going and sitting through a meeting or things like that, and just kind of speaking to those people's strengths and getting them involved in that way. That was a good passage for me.
Yeah, I've definitely appreciated all the different like levels of like recruitment and involvement of people that we read earlier. I'm definitely gonna need to go back and see. I think sometimes like trying to kind of involve everyone as much as possible can like really lead to just like waste of energy on everyone's part. So that sounds like a good, and especially thinking of my own activism, that sounds really useful. Also, the part about social ties, it's definitely kind of hard. I've been in several groups where we organize a lot together, and I've definitely knew that about like the importance of social ties, and we get along, but like we were rarely doing things together, like kind of outside of activism, because with activism and like just regular life, there's just like no time. So I don't know if people have some ideas of like how to mix that more, like even just like hanging out after meetings. I would always suggest that we do that, and then it would never happen. Even though everyone's already there, like pre-pandemic, so yeah, if anyone has suggestions, let me know.
My personal approach is just trying to make it kind of organic in a sense. Like, okay, so like hanging out after work days has worked out really well for us, because I think that after work days, people are like super open to just like eating dinner together and drinking beer and stuff. Cause I don't know, after you just do a bunch of physical labor, that just feels supernatural, right? Like everybody's going to do that anyway. So doing it together makes perfect sense. But then also we just like hang out and talk like for hours afterwards. And that's an incredible, tool for cohesion, but also just like certain members in the organization, just like, especially like new members who I hit it off with, like we'll just like hang out and talk, and I'll just like mentor them and stuff. And that's like been a recurring process in the organization. It's just like, I'll just like hang out with a new member from, once they start coming around more, and we'll just like kind of talk about theory and practice and like history, but we'll also just kind of like chill and be friends, and I think it has to be organic. I think if people feel like it's like forced or required or something, it'll feel more like, oh yeah, this is what's on the program. It has to be something where it's like, oh no, we actually like want to hang out. What's the thing we want to do together? So yeah, I don't know. It's probably gonna have to be super contextual. I did bring up on the screen here. Let me fix it here. I did bring up on the screen the circles model. The circles model reminds me a lot of a specifismo. The specifismo also has a circles model. So the most outward circle was the general population. And it says, for those people, ask for small actions, then escalate. Make personal contact via guest talk, social events, or canvassing. Have a big event. Do something dramatic. Keep track of contacts. Reach out online. Yeah, that makes sense. We do some of that. Insofar as that S was asking earlier, like how much of this do I think we are or not doing? Asking for small actions and escalating, yeah, coming out to a work day, that's a pretty small action. Or coming to like one of these reading groups, pretty small action. Make personal contacts via guest talk, social events, or canvassing. Yeah, we're all engaged in social insertion. Not all of us, but almost all of us are engaged in social insertion. We're all attending the meetings of other organizations, or or participating and helping organize with other organizations. And that's a huge part of the process. Like that is 100% correct. Have a big event, do something dramatic. We don't really do that very much. It's something maybe we should do though. Maybe we should hold a rally or something at some point. Keep track of contacts. Absolutely. Yeah. Reach out online. Absolutely. 100%. Then the next one, mass base, hold trainings to raise awareness and counter fear. Yeah, I guess that's what this is, like organizer education right now. Make material succinct, punchy, and easy to pass on. I think we do that with like the reels. Have members bring a friend. We should. I do it myself. I bring my friends, but I don't think we've ever like explicitly been like, hey, everybody, next time, bring a friend. I guess we could though. Maximize biographical availability. I don't remember exactly what that means, so it's hard for me to know about that one. Approach those already affected. Oh yeah, 100%. That's definitely something we try to do. Then the next circle, auxiliaries, ask people directly. Yes, delegation. Screen volunteers, 100%. We have an entire like admission process. Then don't be afraid to say no. Like letting letting somebody in the group. Yeah, definitely. There have been numerous people that have not made it. And build strong ties. I guess that's going back to what you were mentioning just a minute ago. And the last one, train and retain in the middle. So yeah, I think to some degree, yeah. And most of this, when we do it, 100%, yes, it does lead to more success. It is better when you do all the things described. So we have only about 7 or 8 minutes left. Does anybody have closing thoughts they want to mention?
I was going to say that the splashy event might be that show you guys we got going at the mass movement.
True, actually. Yeah. We've done a couple of those. That's something I think has been super effective for sure. Anybody else have any closing thoughts about the stuff we were reading tonight? I see Zan said, for sure, it's helping people be more available by offering food. Oh, you're talking about the part where I was saying what's biographical availability. I see. It's helping people be more available by offering food, childcare, etc., meeting outside of work hours. I see. Understood. Well, I just want to remind people that if you are listening from one of the stream chats, if you would like to join us for these discussions and you're currently in the stream chat, all you got to do is you got to go to opencollective.com and you just have to become a recurring donor for any amount. And we will give you an invite to the Cooperation Tulsa Discord server, in which case you will be able to see all of our events. You'll get to see a bunch of our internal communication as well. And if that sounds like it's something that interests you, you should go over to opencollective.com and /cooperation-Tulsa. I'm going to try to find something for you here. Okay, getting rid of that part. I'm gonna put it in the chat. There you go. And we need it. Just to be clear, we definitely need it. We just got our electricity hooked up, which means soon we're going to have to start paying our electricity bill. So if you want to help us pay that electricity bill, you should become a recurring donor for any amount to Cooperation Tulsa's Open Collective. It is a huge part of how we carry out our operations. It's part of how we buy tools. It's how we buy fuel. It's how we fund most of what we do at Cooperation Tulsa is small recurring donations from just a bunch of people who support our project. So if you can spare even like $2, $5, $7 a month, you should go over to that Open Collective link. You should click there and become a recurring donor. Yeah. They say, suppose I'm a Fed and I become a recurring donor. How would you know? Well, you know what? If you're a Fed in the Discord server, it's not going to get you a whole lot. It's an above ground organization, so you're not going to discover a whole lot that'll help you. But if that's the case, I mean, just you just go ahead. I hope though, if you're a Fed, you're going to give us a lot of money. That's what I would hope, at least for putting us at risk like that. But yeah, in any occasion, I think that is the main thing I would emphasize here. Oh, yeah. No, what am I talking about? No, if you're a Fed, you're going to learn so much on the Discord. You should definitely give us like $3,000 a month so that you can get access to that juicy Discord where there's all of this really important, scandalous information. Scandalous. Oh, my gosh. Wow. Anyway. Yeah, no, I think that's it. Anybody else have any closing thoughts?
No, this was really great. Thank you as ever for putting it on.
Of course, happy to do so. This book is phenomenal. I really do think it's like almost like the ideal book for this program. So I think it always inspires conversations, and I'm always learning stuff from it, and I suspect everybody else is as well. Yeah, no, I really appreciate him writing this book. It's phenomenal. But I think that's it. We're going to call it to a close, everybody. I appreciate everybody joining, and I hope you had a good evening. I will see you week after next week in this time slot on Monday. There will be the popular education program, and I think we're going to be learning about Bakunin and collectivism at that one, which is pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to that. And we've switched over now. We've changed our delegation over to Dom and Jordan so that Theo can rest and plan for their wedding. So that is it, everybody. I appreciate you coming here, and I'll see you week after next.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye.
Night.